A very warm welcome to you all. Welcome to Designing Cities for All.
The 2-year activity program of Pakhuis de Zwijger,
in which we take a deep dive into designing products,
places and systems for all.
At every level, we can see certain communities being marginalized, being taken advantage of, and it's all part of the design.
When you're neurodiverse, you're in a world that isn't designed for you.
We're not the only species on the planet. The city needs to be also a city for the other species.
And we need to do something because the old structures in which we worked don't work.
Things won't change just if we just let things happen.
Instead of saying, what can we do to mitigate the impacts? We need to start asking ourselves, what is causing that?
Design is political, that we need to design processes, that we are all different, but there are things that unite us.
These are the things that need to be on the table, that need to be recovered in order to redesign the society.
Everything around us was once designed and can therefore be redesigned.
How do we teach design in a way where students can be really critical of the systems of power that have informed and dominated design?
Inclusion happens by design or not at all.
I think it's always some kind of a co-creation process, and you have to make very little steps and then figure out together what works and what doesn't.
it takes as much time to do something good as it takes time to do something bad.
All design tells a story.
But there's also a bit of a need to not just write ourselves into the past, but also kind of write ourselves into the future.
I invite you so much to join my path of liberation, and I'm hopefully being welcomed by your path of liberation.
We have to heal collectively. We have to help each other understand some of these constructs that actually divide us.
Not fitting in was a blessing, or I would have turned out just like you.
Yeah, that was a wrap-up of the first 2 years of Designing Cities for All, a research and activity program that takes a deep dive into actually indeed designing products and places and systems for all. And this year, 2023 and 2024, DCFA will be looking at the topic of regeneration and regenerative design, together with 6 DCFA fellows and many designers, researchers, storytellers, artists, performers, scientists, other experts. My name is Lindsay Beda, and I have the honor and the pleasure of moderating this series and this conversation tonight with our wonderful fellow, Sarah Ichioka. And tonight is our final episode in this series. And it's such a pleasure that she's here with me at the table. Singapore-based urbanist Sarah Ichioka. She's been contributing from Singapore for 4 episodes, and now we can spend this time here at the table really grounding the conversations. You're so welcome, Sarah.
Wonderful to be here.
Yeah. Tonight, we titled the episode A Plan for the Planet, in which we invited several inspiring researchers, designers, and artists to go deeper in, this topic of restoring planetary health from their perspective. Unfortunately, one of our speakers, Marianne Stuiver, got ill and won't be able to join us tonight. Marianne, if you're somehow watching this, we wish you that you feel better very soon. And we have your book here at the table, at least as a little bit of presence from Marianne. And we're here with all of you. It's really nice to see all your faces. It's a little bit dark now, but I can still see your faces. You here in the audience, you watching online from home or wherever you are. How are we feeling? We're good? Yeah, how is it to be sitting here? Comfy? Bit dark? But excited. Now we're really happy that that you all came tonight, and we would love your participation as well, of course, and your input. So if you're here, then you can just, we will have a couple of rounds of questions or, input, asking, and just raise your hand and a mic will come to you. If you're watching from home, we also have a way for you to participate, a tool called Mentimeter. So you go to menti.com and then you insert the code 55267382, and then I'll get your question here as well. So you're welcome to join in. Okay, ready to get started? Yes, thank you for that. I would love to... Who here already knew Sarah beforehand? Yeah, a couple of hands. So, yeah, let me give you the proper full introduction, because I really am very inspired by you, and I really admire everything that you do, Sarah. So Sarah Ichioka is an urbanist, a strategist, a curator, a writer. She leads Desire Lines, which is a strategic consultancy for environmental, cultural, and social impact initiatives, and working with a whole range of organizations. And she's an author. She co-authored the book that's right there in front of me with a very telling title, Flourish, Design Paradigms for Our Planetary Emergency, which she co-authored with Michael Pollan. And that's a very useful guide, actually, with a set of principles that we need to internalize, all of us, if we truly want to address the crisis that we find ourselves in this day and age. And in this fellowship, we're also here to, explore the beyond, like what, and the role for all of us in this, because it's not a niche thing that we're talking about. It's relevant for each and every one of us. So was that complete enough, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Very generous. Thanks.
But how does it just feel as a human to just land here in Amsterdam and be in this room with us?
Well, it feels exactly that, human.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm totally honest, talking into a screen in my study by myself is not the most restorative activity.
I imagine, yeah.
But it's so nice to be here. It's such a huge honor to be taking part in this program. And yeah, just to be here in this beautiful city, watching the light change on the water and all the hyacinths coming into bloom on the towpaths, and yeah, getting the chance to hear from everyone who's here tonight.
Yeah, great. Let's, I wanted to kind of frame today's topic with you, but as we do that, you brought a short introduction video about change. It's animated by Michelle Urban. Can you just briefly intro why you wanted to show this particular video?
Yeah, so this is an excerpt from a talk that my wonderful, wonderful Flourish co-author Michael Pollan and I delivered at the Royal Society of Arts in the UK, who, if people in the audience aren't familiar with the RSA, I think if you enjoy Packhaus's program, you'll also, I will algorithmically recommend, you may also enjoy the RSA's program. They're also very interested in interrogating building regenerative futures together. So we gave a talk there to launch Flourish at the start of last year. And subsequently, they excerpted this bit and set it as the brief for a student animation competition. And I love it because it was really my attempt to very quickly lay out the argument of why, how we can work to change mindsets, but it's not only changing mindsets. I think there was a misunderstanding from some readers that at first glance we were just arguing to change the words that we use. So it was trying to articulate the theory of change, where changing the mindset is the first step, but we also have to think about how we then lean into that in our practices with the intention of eventually embodying that lived reality that we've co-created with others. And I think that Michelle's animation beautifully. It brings that imaginatively to life.
Yeah, let's have a look.
We urgently need to find ways to design that achieve net positive impacts. But how are these changes ever going to happen? First, we must recognize that change is necessary. Second, we identify, debunk, and reject the degenerative mindsets or paradigms that are harming us and other life on Earth. Cognitive neuroscience has shown that the best way to dislodge a story is not to argue against it, but to shape a different, more persuasive story. So that means that step 3 is that we need to imagine, develop, celebrate, and embrace the new or recovered mindsets that put care for life, all life, at the very center of everything we do. Step 4, we need to maximize our own personal agency, finding new purpose for our work and life and taking positive action to realize these mindsets. And then finally, we join together with others in diverse coalitions to build regenerative communities and systems that benefit the majority of life on Earth, not just a tiny minority of one species.
Super clear. Very imaginative indeed. And these steps are quite in line, I feel, with some of the conversations we've been having here over the last episodes. And there were some accents that are not in this video. Of course, it's a 1-minute video, but I just want to ask you, what have been some of your highlights or recurring things that you were yes, during this fellowship that you really want to cherish and take along?
The first thing is it's really a holistic observation that I feel that the way that you have moderated the conversations and the way that the Packhouse team have assembled the speakers is very in line with my understanding of regenerative best practices and kind of how we relate respectfully and generatively with one another, because I think too often there are examples of frameworks within which the topic of conversation is one thing, but the way in which it's structured is something else. And
thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I felt there's been a consistency there holistically. And that concept of relationality has been a recurring theme that I've felt has run through so many of the conversations, both how we relate to one another as human beings, and then how we relate to our broader communities, and then moving how we relate to other life forms and the greater living systems in the places where we live.
Yeah.
And this, you and I have talked about the touchstone of groundedness and grounding. And I think another theme that's really resonated for me is this idea of embodiment, thinking about how we embody new mindsets really, really in ourselves, not just in our heads, but in our bodies, and then our bodies grounded in a particular space in relation to others. And then finally, I think that the discussion of different ways of learning has also really resonated for me throughout, including practices of deep listening. And within that, the idea of expanding what is valued and who is valued when we're doing those listings. And then finally, maybe I've really been so grateful for all of the participants who've shared their different metaphors that they use.
Yeah.
In their practice and thinking. And in particular, I'm always trying to dislodge mechanistic metaphors that govern my own thinking. I mean, it's pretty relentless. I'm still heavily conditioned to think in a mechanistic way. But anytime someone offers the metaphor of the cycle of breath as a different way of thinking about temporality, or offering the metaphor based on lived professional experience of interacting with the soil in the case of Victoria Mackenzie, right?
Yeah.
That these are incredibly powerful gifts to share with us, and I'm certainly have cherished them already.
Yeah. Can you maybe give an example of a more mechanistic metaphor that we are stuck in.
Oh my goodness.
Like humans as computers, maybe. Or
they're
kind of,
everywhere,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Sorry? In the pipeline. In the pipeline.
Yes.
It is in the pipeline. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
That
like
one
oil
is,
metaphor.
Yeah, actually, hilariously, one of my clients has talked about, we just need to think about what regenerative projects we have coming down the pipeline. Watershed, I don't know, what can we talk about? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I also really feel, adding to what you're saying, there were so many like eye-opening moments for me personally as well. And some of the speakers that were in previous episodes and are in the room with us right now, really like taught me some things about, for instance, like slowing down at the pace of nature, right? And to be able to listen, or this idea of really localizing something, not just like keeping it like as an idea, but like take your students to a river in Italy and see, what is the river telling us about what it needs, and also this idea of just experimenting, just like, we don't have the overview, we're just like being part of a bigger system. But despite these kind of real insights and beautiful conversations, I am also kind of, I carry a sense of discomfort. Because it almost feels like it goes hand in hand, like the more beautiful the conversation, and we can also kind of, just like kind of indulge in that and feel really happy about what we discussed, and kind of lull ourselves to sleep in some cases, even, like because of it. And so this sense of urgency that we all share, I know that, like how do we then go from that, like those beautiful realizations to like this giant breakthrough that we're all working towards? And I don't know, do you share that sense of discomfort, or do you see it?
I do. I think it's something that we all just need to hold one another accountable for, that it is really important to share ideas.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Share ideas and share inspiration. And I'd so much rather be motivated by moving towards something beautiful than like running away from something terrifying.
Can you say that again?
Oh, I would so much rather live my life trying to run towards something beautiful than run away from something that's terrifying.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that we can ignore.
We can still run.
Right?
Yeah.
We can still run.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I hope we can puzzle through together in conversation with those in the audience and others who will join us around the table.
Yeah.
It's how we find that balance between trying to share the beauty of ideas and visions and how that bridges through to practicalities. And it's something that actually just because they're not well and aren't able to join us, just to give a tip of the hat to Marianne Stiver. I think that their book, The Symbiotic City.
Yeah, you have it right here, yeah.
We have not one, but 2 copies of the book. Does such a beautiful job, because I think so often this argument can be levied at academic discourse as well. It's like constructing beautiful frames of theory, but then how does it relate to practice? And I think that The Symbiotic City is a really lovely example of something that is very reputably grounded in theory.
Yeah.
But also really intentionally does come down to the ground of practice. What does a symbiotic city look like on the ground?
Yeah.
So if we can use that as a nice frame of being able to encompass the bigger picture, the bigger dream.
Exactly.
But also in a way that's applied and realizable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and based on the lived experience of people around the world, like experiencing what we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I did feel kind of like the energy shift in the room when we started talking about discomfort. I think it can also be a fuel, actually, in our conversation tonight. I think we should accept it as a challenge to ourselves. All right. Can we maybe, to round I would love to open up the floor to your questions to Sarah in a second. But just to ask you, what will we be exploring today? Or what would you like to explore today with our other speakers?
So if in one of the earlier episodes, there was the statement made that it's not that our systems aren't working well, it's they're working perfectly, but they're just orientated towards the wrong goals. The idea here is if we acknowledge that so many of our economies and our societies have been structured towards this kind of ridiculous purpose of growth, endless, boundless growth.
Mm-hmm. Endless inhale.
Endless inhale, endless gorging of face with junk food. What would our economies, our societies, our cultures look like if they were reorientated towards the lodestar of planetary health?
Yeah.
So that's the general frame.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it's important here. My discomfort is when we keep everything at a very general level. So a plan for the planet, it's a very catchy title, but planet here I think should be understood in terms of our perspective of responsibility within a broader planetary living system.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think any of us should be making plans for the entire planet.
Mm-hmm.
We should be thinking about what we can do on the ground where we are.
Yeah. Yeah.
People might disagree. But we can see what happens when people gather in rooms and try to make grand plans for the planet.
Yes. So what can we do where we are?
Yeah. Exactly. And so that's the final bit, Lynn, that I really, because I'm here and invested the carbon to be here, and because I really selfishly am kind of in exhale mode right now and really want to hear and learn from others, it's an opportunity to really invite more focused discussion about what's happening on the ground here in the Netherlands.
Mm-hmm.
So taking that planetary perspective, but
being here where we are.
Being here, learning from here.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for framing that for us. Okay. Can we have a little bit of light on the many faces? Yes, thank you. Who would like to respond already to what Sarah has been sharing, or ask a question, or utter a feeling? An exhale. But then in the mic. Cho, do you want to? Yeah, yes, so that people watching online can hear you as well.
Yes, thank you. So I think you already hinted at that tension that I would love you to expand on a little bit, which is the planetary scale and the things that we're just, the projects that we're doing right in front of us. Because we tend to think so much about the planet as this ball, flying through the universe, sort of like this distance perspective on this giant, So the planet as an external object, right, that we can do things to, that we can design, that we can, whereas at the same time, us being here in the biosphere, in the rhizomatic, reality of life, trying to figure out our next steps and how to grow life and health from here on. So that tension.
Sure, did you say rhizomatic reality of life?
Yeah, don't forget about that.
Okay. I'll try.
Right, so something about that tension, because our realities have at the same time become planetary or global, and at the same time that perspective is losing legitimacy and perspective, in my view, following your tension. So what do we do with that?
Could you just say a little bit more about when you say losing legitimacy, what you mean?
Right. So how exactly what you say, trying to make plans for the planet is so grandiose, so distant from reality, so far, so abstract from what life really needs at the moment. So any attempt to do that is, maybe just doomed to, create the same disasters that we're trying to prevent.
So can you repeat your question one more time? Kind of.
So
summarize
maybe
your
go into
question?
that. So expand a little bit about that tension. Where do you see what we can? Where is our agency? What do we do? How do we deal with this tension?
Kind of globalized reality versus. Yeah.
Well, it's really simple, actually. There are 3 easy steps we can take. No, I'm just kidding. I think, just to complicate it more, we haven't talked so much about justice and that aspect. I think that those themes have been really beautifully explored in the first 2 years of DCFA. But I think for me, planetary scale also not just the planet as object, but also just keeping that scale in mind, and the idea that if we are speaking regeneratively, we also have to talk about justice and reparations, and at a global scale, operating within context of coloniality, etc., and continued extractivist systems. So that scale is important to remember. I don't know, when I think about planetary scale, I think, so many of the practices we heard from over the last 4 episodes really are thinking more about the planet as like a Gaian system and a living system, and your interaction with the living system can still be very localized and specific to that place, but you understand that it does affect the entire dynamic. But yeah, I think, going back to the why it's not working for groups of people in a room to try to negotiate, I think it's just a matter of scale and abstraction, and people wearing professional, basically like not negotiating actually as themselves, negotiating as some sort of play-acted version of embodying certain pragmatic interests of their nation state or their corporation, etc. And I think that that's something that I've appreciated from most of the contributors to this program, is people are very conscious of their own positionality, and they're very conscious of how, I guess, their like overall emotional and physiological well-being, and how that impacts the way in which they practice, in professional or political spheres. But yeah, I'd love
so would
to
you
hear
say,
thoughts. Yeah.
can I summarize it as, acting where you are in an embodied way in right relation to your direct environment, while having the awareness of the interconnectedness of everything we do?
I think so. And I think different people are called to do different work.
Mm-hmm.
And so some people, especially people who maybe are, by nature of their birth or their upbringing or their education or whatever maybe, are more sit on different intercultural thresholds, might have more of an interpretive role between kind of practices or mindsets in different spaces and places. Whereas other people might be called to be doing that work that is really getting hands dirty on the ground.
Yeah.
Literally
at
planting.
The farm.
At the farm, in the river.
Yeah.
At the protest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's also weaving in, all of that, those inclinations. Yeah. Let's bring in some of our speakers that can shed light on this question as well. I feel so in the second part of our conversation, we would love to invite in, thinkers, change makers, examples of how, what you said, like, what does it look like actually if we shift the perspective and do things differently? So I would love to have your help in welcoming with love Quint Verschuren and Selçuk Balamir. Hi. Hello. Welcome, both of you. So Quint, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
First of all, yeah, thank you for having me here today. Like, it's such a wonderful experience to be here and an absolute honor to be sitting around this whole room of experts, even in the audience, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as well.
But yeah, so you'd like to hear about...
Yeah, I would love to introduce you. You can speak about yourself the best, of course, but just to say you're the co-founder of Flip the City. I saw on your LinkedIn page that you also initiated many more things in the same realm of circularity, I would say. You went back to school, master student, biochemistry, biotechnology.
Exactly, yes. I'm still studying.
Still studying, yeah, while being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, trying to manage, mixing these two things together.
Yeah.
It is challenging, but it's definitely an experience that is, I've gained so much valuable insights from, and the connections and the people, and also just being in touch with the things that really matter to me.
Yeah.
I think that's just, it's been a beautiful experience. Lots of ups and downs, but it's been...
an embodied example of no time to waste here. I would love to hear about your practice at Flip the City. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Of course. So, at Flip, I call it Flip the City. What we try to do is we try to find value in different kinds of waste streams. And, there's one thing I heard from Mary Douglas that really kind of struck me. It was that waste is just matter that is out of place. And
waste is matter that's out of place. Yeah.
Yeah, when you realize that, like, a lot of times we throw things away when in fact, like, we just couldn't find a use for it. It's just that it's not being in this environment where it is useful, right? And so at Flip, what we try to do is try to look at waste from like a different lens. Almost like looking at the flip side of the coin,
Nice.
And how this relates to kind of like regenerative practice is that, at Flip the City, one of the main things that we look at is duckweed. And that's what you guys see on this pictures here.
Eendekroos in Dutch.
Eendekroos, exactly, yeah.
Duckweed, yeah.
And what duckweed is it's a really interesting aquatic plant, actually, which grows during the summer and spring in the Netherlands. And what you find is that the canals in the Netherlands are fully covered by duckweed. And this is actually...
It started looking like a field that you can want to jump on, but...
Yeah, and it kind of smells, and apparently it kills the aquatic life underneath as well by blocking out the sunlight. And what we do with this aquatic plant now is that we as in the municipalities, collect these plants and incinerate them or send them to landfills. When actually, if you look at it from a different angle, these plants are beautiful plants that are able to be carriers of nutrients that is actually cleaning the waterways. Because in the Netherlands, we have this issue of the nitrogen crisis where a lot of runoff is polluting the waters. And so what you get is duckweed bloom, because just like any other organism, when there's a lot of nutrient in one area, you just want to proliferate, right?
Okay, that's why.
Yeah, and so, by collecting out the duckweed, we're kind of just taking out nutrients that has been misplaced.
Yeah.
And putting it in a place where it will better fit.
Right, so what do you do with it?
Yeah, so we put it in soil that is depleted from nutrients.
Yeah.
And what you can do is that we hope to get to this point where people can just buy this tile that has, this is version 1. You see it's a bit crumbly, and we're working to make it a bit more refined. But basically, inside these tiles, we want to embed seeds of local plants, different diversities of plants.
Right.
And these plants would then, allow for insects to come, for birds to come.
Nice.
And the grandest idea is kind of that, imagine if sidewalks were filled with these kinds of tiles, it would almost be like a highway for organisms to travel from different hotspots of life in a city.
So the tiles would be like really like form the streets that we walk on, or is it like tiles that you insert in the soil and then things bloom?
Yeah, so maybe a tile is kind of a misleading name because you can't step on it. So we're trying to think of a different name, and if you guys have any ideas or inputs, I'm here. Ears are open. But
Nice.
yeah, so it's more
Do we
like
have any
fertilizer.
ideas? What would you call this thing? A pile?
Pile.
A bile.
Oh. All right, I'll add it to the list. It's a mat. Yeah.
A mat. Yeah.
Duck
mat.
That's going to be in the highlight reels of this season.
I'm sorry, I just ruined this whole highlight reel. But
A
yeah.
duck mat. I like it.
So it becomes really interesting when you can think about all different kind of plants that you can embed into this tile.
Yeah.
Because you can also embed plants that are nitrogen fixers, and even once the tiles have run out of nutrients itself, now you have plants that are continually bringing in nutrients to the soil.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
And I know that at dinner we were here together. You said that, on a whole different note, you're so entrepreneurial, like really creative, thinking of ways to kind of put the puzzle together in a different way. But that it's the landscape that you operate in as a circular entrepreneur, let's say, or a regenerative entrepreneur is quite challenging.
Yeah.
Can you say something about that? And how you make it work anyway, apparently?
Well, I don't know if it has fully launched yet, but there's something.
With the new rebranding, it's going to, you're gonna get it. Duck mat.
A duck mat. So yeah, like I was telling you earlier, there seems to be a lot of, how do you say, like face support for circular businesses to come up, sustainable businesses. The government's always saying like do start your thing, we'll support it. But what you find out is that once you're actually trying to start a startup in this kind of area, people are kind of reluctant to help you out because it's such a, they're like, why should I try this when I have like good old fertilizer or, potting soil that is like 50 cents for like 50 liters?
Yeah.
Why should I buy this tile that looks like this right now? But, yeah, so that has been an issue. And it's also been an issue with the capital because investors are also not so keen on, investing into something that has a lot of risk like this.
Yeah.
And also in the policy side, we're dealing with an issue where, duckweed is considered as waste by law.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you to sell a waste material, that's like another like legal issue.
Barrier.
Barrier, exactly.
Right.
That makes it difficult for circularity to happen.
So what would you say are the more like systemic conditions that need to change for initiative like yours to flourish?
I think first of all, recognizing that, waste shouldn't mean the end of life of a certain material.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
like what I said earlier from Mary, like, waste is just matter that is out of place.
Out of place, yeah.
And I think, they should realize that more. And just if you say that you want circular startups to come up, there should be some sort of infrastructures that support this. But at the moment, I feel that from our perspective, there's just not much to kind of climb on besides just persevering through.
Perseverance, yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm curious, would you hear when you hear Quint speak about this? Both elements, like the passionate entrepreneur and the like.
Thank you so much for sharing your project. I really hope it. I hope it grows. It seems to me that maybe using the frame of stewardship might be a more accurate way to describe what you're aiming to do, because it's not really, I mean, in your ideal world, right, you're not going to constantly have nitrogen deluged canals, right? That's the broken part of the system. But it seems to me from what you're saying, you're looking to be a steward of the ecosystem and you're trying to restore it one way that can you hear me?
Yeah.
Trying to restore in one way, but that also adds a net positive benefit, right? So it's not just how do we get rid of the duckweed, but how can the duckweed actually become a positive contributor to the flourishing of other kinds of life elsewhere within the living system. But yeah, it sounds like a big challenge. I think I would just say, read Marion Stiver's book, because in it there's a lot of very practical ideas about forming coalitions, and I think Kate Rayworth, the donut economics genius champion, amazing person, always says, don't knock on closed doors. And if it seems like certain kinds of investors or certain kinds of bureaucrats are closing their doors in your face, try to think more broadly about, in an ecosystemic way, you know, who else might I find common cause with? How can I support them? And then how might they in turn support my initiative?
Common cause, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's really, it's interesting you brought that up. Just recently, around 2 months ago, we're now part of this project called the Circular Chain Project, where we're working with different stakeholders, different people, different companies at kind of the different nodes of the duckweed system. That's what I would call it right now. But basically, you know, we have people who are collecting the duckweed, people who are transporting it and the drying process, and we're the ones that are processing it. And along these different steps, you've got to realize that, yeah, all these stakeholders, they also want to make their business more circular. And, you know, for some people in, let's say, transportation, it's quite difficult to find a supply chain or a chain to kind of step into.
So you add value for them as well.
Yeah, I think we add value to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would love to bring in your neighbor, Selçuk Balimir. Thank you for sharing so far. Selçuk.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Great to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. I'm really happy. We met each other on a couple of years ago on a day that, like, deep lockdown times, that we had to all stay in our houses and do a panel like that.
Yeah.
But this is so much better. Selçuk, you're a just transition researcher. You're a post-capitalist designer. You teach eco-social design to several groups of students.
Many words, same worldviews, I guess.
Many words, same worldviews.
Yeah.
You've been very active as an activist as well. Can you tell us what does it mean to be a post-capitalist designer, and how does that fuel kind of how you approach things?
Sure. This, of course, originates in my design studies, where I didn't want to be an advertiser. I didn't want to be part in the machine, and yet I did not know any ways to actualize that. So I did many people tend to do, step back into academia, research for a few years. So in terms of practice, it is still a work in progress. But I did take the time to at least have some theoretical research on what could be counted as a post-capitalist design practice. And some of the findings I have are around, so the previous cycles of, let's say, ecological interest in design fields, call it sustainable, green, circular, tend always to focus into the material performance, material characteristics, to the point that it gets quite myopic.
What do you mean by myopic?
That the focus becomes, yes, we made it more efficient, we made it more circular, and yet the social relations these are embedded into gets a bit lost. I have some provocative examples, which are mostly greenwashing, of course, of a gas station of BP that is all solar panels, recycled aluminium, cacti that catch rainwater. everything to still pump gas into cars, right?
Yeah.
So these are extreme examples, of course, but my research has been an invitation to look at what are those social relations that condition our design practices, and to what extent we can disentangle them from capitalist relations, from exchange relations, from wage labor, from intellectual property rights, industrialized production. So it is many things at once, but when you look at the best practices in different fields, some patterns emerge. Indeed, these are based on peer production, based on open source and digital manufacturing. But mainly, perhaps, the projects that work the best are the ones that combine, on one hand, really prefigurative practices in the present, like yours, Quint. You get your hands dirty in the present, with a bold, visionary, speculative view of where we want to head to. And that combination is a quite potent one in the examples I've looked at. The most popular and maybe familiar one for you would be precious plastic. Open source machines, low tech that you can develop yourself and use to recycle plastic. So the machines are here, they work, you can build livelihoods around them. But their goal is to, actually do it better than so-called recycling industries. So these kinds of tensions.
So this bold vision and the actual tangible ways of doing it. Yeah. And you also, like, one of the things that make me so happy about you is your creativity. Really, like, you seem like in all the initiatives that you do or have started or have been a part of, that seems like it's always surprising, right? And I wonder what you would say is the role of, like, tapping into our creativity if it comes to, like, these giant topics that we're talking about, restoring planetary health.
Great, thank you for the compliment, first of all.
No, it's the truth.
So, changing hats. So my previous answer was a bit more academic, boring research.
Okay,
right?
let's.
So,
what hat are you now wearing?
Because this kind of a research behind the desk was not really for me, I really delved into climate justice organizing for the last decade. And it turns out, activists, as selfless they are, dedicated they are not very creative. They do the same actions, the same tactics over and over again. And in those kinds of settings, indeed, my creative skills, I thought, how can I put my design skills in the service of social movements?
Is design synonymous to creativity for you?
Not exactly, but indeed it can scale from how do you make a banner and flag production for an action the most effective and fun is a design problem, to how do you actually design an organization, a community, a strategy. So there are all these overlaps between what are design-related fields and practices and things that, like the vocabulary and the imaginary and the toolbox of activists. I'm glad that you brought the theory of change as a key concept, where there is this kind of an overlap, where indeed with my students as well I try to bring, so like, what is that theory of change? What are the steps in between that bring us there?
Yeah.
So the kind of things I brought to the climate justice movement was the kind of more imagination and those speculative tools to imagine that the world we wish needs to be expressed and visualized and felt in the present, more than the nose, more than the, like, I've been shouting, keep it in the ground off the roofs for the last decade, but it remains so abstract, right? But the moment you turn into an intervention in the Shell shareholder meeting, saying, this is going to be your last shareholder meeting because we are going to shut you down next year. What are you going to do with your free day that day? It opens up possibilities, it opens up imagination, and it rallies people around these goals.
Yeah. Nice. Sarah, do you have any questions for now for Selçuk? You're taking it in.
Incredibly inspiring. Have you given up on academia, or do you think that academia has a role to play? Like, what would the ideal role, and also we have a current student with us too.
Yeah,
a return student. What in your view is the ideal role of an academic institution in making social change?
Good question. I think this is the whole containerization that is part of the problem, right? Academics here, creatives there, politicians there, maybe some, we tend to create these silos that maybe work for some issues, but they miss the bigger picture. They miss the holistic and intersectional connections around that. My interest would be to indeed like just transition is something where creatives touch upon either through their practices, the prefigurative practices, or through their speculation. Just transition is also something let's say the think tanky policy developers, researchers work on as much as social movements in the ground. So how can we bring these different disciplines, different codes, different practices together to collaborate on just transition? Because we don't have spaces where these different milieus, different codes and cultures get to collaborate. So research, academia is one of them, but not the only one.
Yeah. Thank you for now, Selçuk. I think we have a little sense of who we have here around the table before we dive deeper into the conversation. I would also love to invite all of us to take a little moment to step out of our heads and feel more with our full selves with a spoken word performance by artist and energy transmuter Chanel Holder. Yeah. Chanel, shall I introduce you more, or would you like to do it yourself?
No, please.
We're so happy you're here. Chanel Holder, he's a wordsmith, he's a sociologist with a specialization in social inequalities, but he also hones into his spiritual gifts as an empath to capture what is happening here and to, use it to address the phenomena that we need to address. So I'm very excited that you're here. Give him a warm hand.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I appreciate it. I'll just dig into the piece I have at hand. And it's called Reflections on Bigger Boats. I had a performance back in January here at Pakhuis de Zwijger for an event for the series Samen tegen Racisme. It's, in English translated, it's Together Against Racism. We address climate racism and climate justice, and how the climate issue we now face is not the same for everyone. In a piece I performed back then, Same Storm, Different Boats, I talked about how we are in the same storm, but have different boats. How the major players and biggest influencers of the climate crisis we face today, for starters, big corporations profiting off the planet, as well as the industrialized capitalist societies that enable them, they treat the perceived other as a distant cause, as something they are separate from. Whether that is the societies that have been historically marginalized by means of colonization, exploitation, or both, or whether that is the natural resources and nature herself that is perceived as distant, as a commodity, as something that can be used and exploited without any consequences. In the Same Storm, Different Boats, I talked about how power dynamics are the mechanics, how money matters, how ultimately it's about profit, 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 profit. Our greed as industrialized societies in a capitalistic world to nefariously make money will be the burden that the perceived other will have to carry. Because we've got fossil fuels fueling our systems. We choose to enable corporations to make money rain even as sea levels continue to rise. We know that people will be getting sick, the earth is getting sick as the big wallets keep getting thick. Yet we choose to stick to profit, 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 profit. We outsource production, capitalizing as we let waste build up in developing countries. All in the meanwhile, we talk about reuse, reduce, and recycle in our regions. We enjoy electric vehicles, talk about circular economies, renewable energy, and aspire to be greener. But will it be at the expense of profit, 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 profit? Indeed, we are notoriously known for profiting off the lives and suffering of others, profiting of lands that were never given to us. We take resources that are not ours to claim, yet we've decided to make ours and extract all we wanted out of them until they are left naked, poor, depleted to their core. We entertain greenwashing, buying and selling carbon credit, well aware that big corporations hire PR firms to paint their interest as seemingly aligned with current needs. We allow companies to play pretend to care as we look away. We let them show the world what it wants to see. We advocate for sustainability goals, but only as long as they're sustaining our interest and our ability to keep making profit, 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 profit. And I say our and we, even as I cannot find myself belonging to this group, not historically, not mentally, but I take responsibility for the privilege I have where I'm living and the access that comes with it. I can entertain critical discourses and solutions to something I had no part in creating but need to live with. I'm in a bigger boat now, as is everyone sitting in this room. We treat the perceived other as a distant cause, as something we are separate from. And this is because, indeed, we have been conditioned to believe that we are distant from them for so long that we think that they are separate from us. We fail to realize that othering life herself will be our demise. We are in the same storm, and this issue will affect all of us, but we have different boats. We have a collective issue all of us face with no collective action, and there can't be because context matters. We have a problem that we will all have to deal with in various degrees, but not everyone has the same resources to tackle it in the same way. Some boats are filled with opportunities and new technologies, while others are one blow away from a hole from which they can't recuperate. And now, being in this space here today, I can see some of the opportunities in the boats we share in this part of the world. We can reimagine, regenerate, we can redesign from our vantage point. We can renew, we can remedy, restore, if we want to, if we truly want to. As a matter of fact, we can afford to lead a revolution from something that we have caused. We have the capacity to entertain a different way of living and ground it in practice. A new way of being. We can redefine progress. I just hope that we don't get lost again concerning ourselves too much with our boats, while once again forgetting about their vulnerable state. I just hope that we can include everyone in our definition of humanity and our understanding of causes that need attention, places that need restorations, and people that need dignification. Indeed, a plan not only for our region, a plan for the planet.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil Holder. I think it's a crucial perspective that you're bringing in. And let's start with that. My first question to you all is, in Chanel's performance, he is surfacing power dynamics and their privilege differences in this transition. And it means something for how we approach this run towards the beautiful, towards the regenerative and the restoring. So I would love to ask you and invite you to make it as practical and grounded as we can. What does this given mean for how we conduct our respective practices? What does this mean, the power dynamics, the privilege differences in how we go about what we are trying to do? Who can I give the word first?
Could you repeat that again?
Yes. So my question is, like, we live in a world with a lot of power differences and power concentration and inequality. And we need to take that into account in how we do the things that we do, right? The regenerative practices that we adopt, the way we do our projects and initiatives. So what does that mean? What does this power inequality mean for how we do what we do? As practically as we possibly can answer this question. Selçuk is like ready to fire.
Connects to, well, first of all, who needs a PhD when you can have such a great spoken word, no?
Yeah.
It captures much more than chapters. Thank you so much for this. And also, it is funny, I had this workshop with students where we did 1 minute TikTok climate propaganda videos. And one of them was exactly about we are in the same storm, not in the same boat. So love to share that with you. I think the question of power is really fundamental, and this is one that design is not exactly equipped all the time to address frontally, because we tend to work on solutions, we tend to work on alternatives, and not always how do we disrupt, disentangle, and disobey the systems in power. So there is potential of thinking systemically about alternatives, but we don't necessarily have the tools to deploy power or counterpower to demolish what is there. And that's where I also get usually stuck. I am on my activist heart wants to indeed work on the resistance. My creative side wants to work on alternatives, and the ones that work the best is when these things come together.
Resistance and alternatives.
Yeah, but our access to power, our privileges, since they are differentiated, it means that the roles we take in these projects need to be differentiated as well. And this is why at the front lines, when you have actual just transition initiatives like setting up indigenous-led solar cooperatives on the pathway of a pipeline, now this is the kind of strategic intervention of a solution that deals with many things at the same time. Similarly, in this part of the world, with the privileges and relative liberties and freedoms we have, indeed putting our bodies on the line and actually disrupting the mechanisms with collective power and trying to put our creativity in its service is another type of agency.
So
different contexts, different agencies.
Interesting. So it's indeed, again, like the creativity in your strategy that brings together the resistance and the alternatives in one. And it's using a privilege like safety to indeed engage in direct action, for instance, because you know you'll be fine, probably.
And maybe most exciting example I know from Europe has been La ZAD, Zone à Défendre in Notre-Dame-des-Landes, where it was like the largest post-capitalist commune or commoning laboratory in Europe, where they were experimenting with all sorts of non-commercial activities in a land that they squatted to resist an airport project. You can always resist an airport project by locking yourselves to things, or you can always go somewhere and create your commune. But when they are in the same place, that creates such a potent solution that decades of resistance ended with this formula, which won. There is no planes taking off there. There is just
there's a commune.
diversity.
Interesting. Sarah, can I invite your perspective in on this?
Thank you. I know that in your bio, Janelle, that empathy is a key word, and I think that that's a common thread that all of us need to cultivate, and that we have perhaps, many people may have been conditioned by their social roles to numb. And I think that there is, not that designers can do everything, but simply because the purview of the fellowship is meant to be talking about regenerative design. So I'm not saying that's only designers' role, but if we think about the role that designers can play, I think back to my wonderful conversation with Professor Saijo, who works in the future design movement in Japan, and how they have designed the process to structurally require or invite people to embody empathy by kind of inhabiting the perspective of future citizens. In the conditions that I think you're raising in your spoken word piece, it's slightly different, right? We shouldn't be, I wouldn't think that someone from a position of privilege should be putting on a robe and kind of play acting the perspective of someone really on the front line of climate impacts. So I think it's a matter more of how we design our processes to actively invite in those actual voices. And there's a really wonderful organization that I've been tangentially involved with in Singapore called Participate in Design, which in the context of Singapore is quite significant. And they always talk about it's designing with people, not designing for people. So I think in the case of thinking about how we bring justice and reparations and different size boats and different equipped boats into the conversation, it's really about who's not at the table, what resources do we have to allocate for them to be at the table. And I think in some small way in dialogues like these, I do think it's very important to acknowledge that for some people, there does need to be resource attached to it and to enable their participation, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Did you have anything to add?
I could, but I'd love to.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Well, I think to me, the idea of power is really connected to, what kind of voices can we hear, like in the dialogue that's putting out there. Like, when someone doesn't have power, it's that they don't have a platform to kind of to share what they want the world to be like, or where we should head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think it's all about leveling up or finding means for people
and allocating the resources, as Sarah was saying, to give people that, amplify
their voices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Along these lines, I also want to ask you, before I open the floor up to your questions again, I want to ask you, because we say all these words of like capitalism and colonialism and like to kind of typify the system that we move around in right now. And I love how in Flourish it's summarized as, we live in a system where there's non-reciprocal forms of taking from the earth and controlling people for profit, right? That's what it comes down to. I feel that was a very powerful sentence. So what I want to ask you is like, what concrete steps will actually move us to a turning point in that? Because it can feel kind of like, we're stuck there. And I would love to also bring in your example, Selçuk, of after Shell as an example of how we can actually move to a turning point towards restoration, rather.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Shall I talk about it?
Please do.
The images that go with it?
Yeah, let's show the images as well.
So, as I explained, like previous work I had was about stating that we cannot design our way out of extractivism, out of colonialism and capitalism. And yet, design can occupy these terrains simultaneously. So when I was asked to organize a summer school at the Architecture Academy here in Amsterdam, broadly around just transition, I approached with this offer to centrally, to focus concretely on one of the obstacles in front of just transition, so that we don't look away and we directly focus to those obstacles.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was Royal Dutch Shell. It's no longer Royal Dutch, but let's call it Shell for short. So what we proposed to 100 students was to take about 20 sites of extraction, of depletion, of disaster that belongs to Shell across the world, from oil rigs to headquarters to pipelines and so on, and to really imagine how that transition is deployed, how they get decommissioned inevitably as like the end of Shell, and how do we see beyond that end? How do we see those geographies, those peoples reflourish? How do they get regenerated? That's why you don't get to see a single designerly perfect state of things in a future utopia, but we see modest incremental steps. You see, for instance, in gas extraction in the deserts that gets returned to its original indigenous inhabitants. You see the headquarters of Shell in London that gets squatted and retransformed around it. I think we have another slide or a few more. Again, some refineries that get flooded and get taken over. An oil rig that turns into a whale feeding station, and so on and so on. Maybe there's more just for illustration purposes.
Yeah, it's really cool too.
So through this, it was an invitation to design students, spatial design students, which are frankly very much invested in the system, right?
There was also a prison, you said, right?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know about that one too.
I wonder if it's here. Maybe let's see if there's another slide. I don't think so. Yeah, it's not here. But basically, they proposed to turn an oil rig into a prison for all the CEOs to student work. Anything's possible. But this was their invitation to the methodologies of just transition. So it is not about reduce, reuse, recycle, but return, regenerate, redistribute,
nice.
and repair.
Sorry, what did you? Replenish.
Replenish, maybe. Or the 4 Ds we used. How do you decommodify, democratize, decarbonize, and decolonize energy systems and trade systems? So it was that kind of an intervention where they do some imaginative, speculative work, but the accumulation of their work adds up to a piece of propaganda, which is actually a calendar, a wall calendar of the next 40 years. That it comes together. So I'm interested in these intersections as I...
Very cool. Yeah, very energizing. Did you take away any of that for your own practice?
I would be interested in longer term, much more embedded, much more localized design, transition design workshops and studios,
Yeah.
But also, how do we make this sovereign? How do we make this... so the fiction that the calendar brings together is that it's a ministry of just transition in year 2060 that commissions this calendar as a way to look back to the last 40 years and celebrate their achievements.
Right.
Can we project those kinds of utopias and build back to where we are?
Some strong backcasting happening there, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure you're well aware of it, but what I love the most is obviously you're subverting Shell's great pride in their future's capabilities, right? That's been a key way that they've exerted influence on governments around the world, not least in Singapore, actually.
The philosopher kings of scenarios.
Exactly, projecting futures, what could happen. So bravo.
Yeah, bravo indeed. Very cool. Any questions from all of you? Yes, I see a question there in the back. The microphone is traveling your way.
Hi. So I just wanted to kind of touch back. We were talking about like privilege earlier. So how do you like, I think a lot of the times conversations like these can get a little like over intellectualized, which makes getting on board with issues like this a little inaccessible for a larger wealth of people. So I know this is a broad question, but like, how do you feel about like making that gap to like make conversations like this more accessible to like a larger wealth of people? Because if you can't understand the issue, you know, you can't get behind it.
So is your question like, how do we make it more accessible?
Yeah, just in the way that like you frame it and talk about it, because obviously you all are very smart people, but even I'm like struggling to keep up with some of the things you're saying.
Could you, thanks for the question, could you venture a guess about what you think?
Sure.
Or what's your view on it also?
Thank you. I think like the best way to do it is just like, because you don't want to insult people by like dumbing things down for them, because at the end of the day, I think we all at a human level understand that like it's important to care for the place you live. Like if you want to change the world, you have to start in your own backyard. I think we all kind of understand that fundamentally, but I feel like just using like less academic language is good, or just making it more relatable to like someone's everyday life. Because it's like if you're living in a city like Amsterdam, you're gonna have a different experience and understanding of sustainability than if you're from like rural Texas or something like that.
For sure.
This is I'm a great admirer of Project Drawdown, which is I know that Pacos interviewed Paul Hawken, who is one of the co-creators of that project, and they have taken this issue head on and are working on a new initiative called Drawdown Neighborhoods, which is really, really practically looking at how we can draw down carbon, but in a really unabstract way, really practical applied ways in specific neighborhoods. And I think a lot of it is also, I think for each of us, it's also understanding that we all have a certain range of audiences who might, actually Lila June Johnson in the second episode said this really well, that different people are on earth to have conversations with, to spread the message in different ways. And I think that what Project Drawdown have done really beautifully with the neighborhood project is they've actively recruited local champions. So it's not actually the Drawdown team sharing their wonderful scientifically informed wisdom. It's working with local champions who already understand the concerns and issues of the people on the ground in these neighborhoods that can then connect with this scientifically backed solutions to reverse climate change.
Yeah, really crucial question. Thank you for that. Any other points that need to be raised? Yeah, I see two more. 1, 2.
Thanks. So kind of similar actually is, I guess the conversation is really surrounding design, and I think design is a fantastic kind of communication between like different spheres or like kind of backgrounds, because design is incorporated in everything. But at the same time, it is a very specific thing that people study, and it has vocabulary, and it can be very intellectualized. So even if we're talking about things that are kind of very broad, the way we talk about design is specific to the academic side of design, which for people who haven't done design or haven't studied it can be difficult to follow. So my question is, for people who aren't designers, what aspects of design, without having to do a master's or without having to study it, can we seek out to study in order to incorporate these really beneficial parts of design into your work, in order to kind of, you know, have that better conversation between different spheres, between different jobs or like backgrounds?
Another great question. We have a student and a teacher in the house, so yeah.
We can debate about it. So, at least for me, I've never had any formal education in design. I studied biochemistry and biotechnology, and I got kind of tired of how zoomed in we got, and so how do you say, not applicable, like whatever I was learning was to the rest of the world. Like at some point, I remember I was at a poster conference where we showed all of our studies and whatever, and I was walking around looking at all these posters, trying to like understand what they were talking about, and after around 15 minutes, I just realized I don't understand any of the posters here, although I am in that field. And then that moment was just like, whoa, like what is this? You know, if I don't understand what my fellow people in the field are making, how can this like be applied somewhere? And so it just felt really far from where reality is. And I think to me, design was kind of like that bridge back to reality. It's how like, to me at least, design is something that's very human-centered, because, you know, nature doesn't need design. Nature has its own design. That is just what nature is. Design is something that's human-centered. And for me, it was a way to connect biology and the things that's happening in biochemistry and to apply it into the world. And hopefully with the goal of like strengthening our connection with nature through design. And yeah, that's my perspective as a student. So I don't know what you might say.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for bringing this aspect. Indeed, these kind of, again, it is one of the side effects of specialization, where you develop these codes and languages in your field and lose connection to the outside world, right? I totally agree with you how the designer can be a facilitator, a mediator in between different worldviews, cosmologies almost. So like we have ecological imperatives, right? They can be either expressed in a very scientific language, super obscure, super complex, or they can be expressed in other cosmologies than the Western ones, which are, again, quite confusing for the average Texas person that we brought in as an imaginary reference point. But the people in Texas have also their needs, their desires, their horizons, and so on. So the designer's work is to somehow bridge those, and sometimes to translate these both the needs and those imperatives into non-language ways. The visualizations, the imaginations, the stories we tell become a much more accessible, a much more democratic pathway to talk about these futures, our fears, our hopes, and the paths that lead there.
Nice. So merge the desires and the imperatives. Yeah. Let's go to our last question that we had in this corner. That was you, right? Yeah. Okay.
Hi, maybe for Sarah. This question is about trust, and what you've learned in your journey about people and trust. I was really struck by a report I read about how little we've grown to trust each other and institutions. It gets back a little bit to that subject of empathy as a power to reverse this trend. So it seems like underlying a lot of what we're talking about is this global warming on the one hand and this sort of cooling in trust of each other. And how can we, in your words, reimagine that so that we can create a basis from which we can create the future you're all talking about?
Nice. What could that look like? Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Such a great audience.
I know. Gosh, I think it's really about having common projects. I think that the most probably the most trusting relationship that I've had outside of my family life in the last 3 years was the collaboration with Michael, my co-author, in that you have to completely, I think so much of my education was about like finding what your voice is and asserting your point and, you know, like finding your position. And when you suddenly have to do that jointly with someone who has very different lived experience and, you know, some shared points of departure, but actually sometimes wildly, you know, different understandings of the world, the ability to negotiate something so that you're eventually speaking with one unified voice is a really, it's a really wonderful experience. But I think that even just being able to collaborate on projects like that, but possibly in the civic space. I mean, I think about various kind of voluntary or activist roles that I've been involved with over time, and you really do have moments where you have to just trust someone else's judgment, and part of that is understanding that you're working towards some common goal, even if your ways of achieving it might be, you might have to relinquish control over that ability. But I do think there's something about coming back to the start of our conversation. And we were actually, we were talking about this before the cameras went on, but we need to think about I think it's one of the major design challenges is thinking about how we design systems for virtual interaction that allow the building of trust in the same way that these sorts of interactions do. So if anyone has examples to share, I'd really love to learn about them.
Can you say that again? Examples of interactions that were...
Examples of how, I think one of the best ways, in my own personal experience, one of the best ways to build trust is to have face-to-face interactions with people over time as you develop some shared common project together.
So examples of how that can be done successfully.
Of how that can be done successfully, not on a face-to-face, one-to-one scale.
Right, a more collective scale. Does anyone have an example? Selçuk has an example.
Well, I kind of have a counter example. I don't know if it qualifies, but
yeah, we can learn from that.
You know how the whole blockchain technologies and bitcoins brag about being a trustless system? And I have a hard time with that. Like, it's a good engineering solution for some applications for sure, but why should building trustless institutions be the goal? I don't get an answer from that. And precisely a living, breathing organism like a society, like a community, uses trust as currency almost, I'm tempted to say. Yeah. So
did you have an example as well?
Yeah, but not a counterexample.
But an actual example. Okay, great.
Antwerp is...
Here's the mic.
Sorry. So it's a positive example, not a counterexample.
Perfect.
I think Antwerp is doing great work experimenting with doing huge participatory design projects to restore trust between a citizens movement and the government that had been completely opposite of each other for years, and now they are truly trying to redesigning the city for all.
Oh, that's interesting to dive into. Thank you for adding that. We've actually almost come to the end of our evening together, strangely enough. But I want to ask you, we're not there yet completely. We still have a performance and we still have, we're here. But, one of our intentions and how you stated it, Sarah, at the beginning of what can we do where we are, right? And I feel all three of you are examples of humans who have kind of, found ways to really use your agency and tune into the bigger whole and kind of, find ways to do something where you are. And I wanted to ask you maybe as just a last kind of round, if you want to, because all of us, that's what we want, right? We want to be a meaningful participant in this shift. So what message would you like to give me and everyone else here and everyone watching, as in what would you like to give us as input or inspiration of how you can start where you are?
Yeah, if I can add.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, in order to appreciate nature and the world around us, you don't really need formal education in this kind of area. You just have to have the awareness that we have a strong connection with all the things around us, right? And I think by being aware that, we're part of this greater system that is interlocked and stuck in this little ball that's floating around a galaxy somewhere,
Mhm.
realize that we're stuck on this ball together, and like if you don't do something about it, we're all gonna probably just die, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think just to keep it very simple, I think it's just about appreciating and embracing the connections that we have with all different kinds of beings in this world. And not even beings, even like things that are, you know, non-living, just like soil, like, I don't know.
Yeah, which is very much alive.
Soil's
yeah.
very much alive.
Very much alive, yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe not how we were taught.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that way.
Yeah. Thank you.
Shall I?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, I wanted to share a final reflection on the title of today, a plan for the planet, and we already discussed that the planet doesn't need a plan, maybe many, but the planet has a plan. It is to flourish, right? It is to create more life. And wherever we are, whichever scale we operate in, if we are contributing into reproducing life, then we are we create friction to the machine of death and destruction, and that makes us part of the plan.
What's one small way we can create life?
All these practices, so anything that fixes carbon, anything that reproduces and cares for life, anything that creates value in non-extractive ways, does it. And
how would you say that to someone who doesn't know all these words?
Care work, cultural work, teaching people.
Yeah.
All these things are definitely low carbon work, but they are actually part of that web of life.
Yeah. Thank you. Sarah.
At risk of sounding very trite, just put down your devices. I genuinely think that kind of all of us being glued to our phones all day, myself included, is one of the major inhibitors to us actually making progress. And those have become kind of the core inputs of both fear-based overwhelm and our inability to trust one another and our inability to interact face-to-face, and also to be overwhelmed by greenwashing counter messages and noise that distracts from the real signal of all of the really incredible work that is being done. So I would just say, do whatever you need to do to reclaim your ability to focus and to connect with the people who are sitting directly opposite you, like on the bus or at the schoolyard, or, as you go about your daily business. So, yeah. Reclaim your freedom to focus on what actually matters.
Yeah. Put the phone away. Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you for this whole entire conversation. I really appreciate you bringing yourselves to this table so that we can start where we are, right here. I want to clap for you, first of all.
Thanks, Lynn, for bringing us together.
Of course. And also close with you, Sarah, because, this is the last of our episodes together. This fellowship, you contributed so much to it. You curated it so beautifully together with the podcast team as well. And now you're going forward. What are you going to take with you?
I'm taking with me gratitude and many, many wonderful examples and new ideas and practices that have been shared. One of the biggest things I appreciated was being brought into contact with people I had zero prior connection to, because I think, again, it's so easy to just rely on the friend of a friend or somebody who studied with somebody or someone who's published in the magazine you happen to subscribe to. So that mixing of the diversification of the ethnosphere, as the anthropologist Wade Davis puts it, which I think will be the salvation of the biosphere.
Which means, in normal words?
The ethnosphere is in Wade Davis's terms, is the collection of all the many rich ways in which we and our ancestors have been human in many different places all around the world. And that, again, referring back to that shining North Star, Lila June Johnson, anyone who didn't, who hasn't yet watched her remarks on the We Are All Stewards program, I'd warmly encourage you to do so. I think we've been completely brainwashed into thinking that we, as humans, are somehow disconnected from broader living systems. But if you look back in any of your ancestries or many current existing cultures around the world that are currently stewarding the majority of surviving, thriving ecosystems around the world, there are so many different ways that we can live in harmony. So that diversification of our cultural reference points is an incredibly important step in understanding how we can reintegrate ourselves with the rest of the living world and really spark our imagination. And I think in terms of the work that I am hoping to do going forward, I'm so grateful that Packhouse allowed the opportunity to explore Flourish further. But I think Michael and I both agree that we're really happy to have the book be out there in the world and to be out there making friends and in conversation with other books and other writers and readers, most importantly. But actually for me now, it really is about doing that, the signal seeking again, and trying to find and raise up the examples of the real transformative work that is being done on the ground around the world by millions of people.
Yeah.
If we only care to look for it and support it.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of grounding. Yeah. Thank you so much for that, Sarah. And thank you for really creating this space for all of us to kind of like join you in your world and your search with all these amazing people that joined us throughout the episode. So happy to have been a part of this. So thank you all very much. Also, all of you sitting here. All right.
And Lynn as well. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very welcome. Very welcome. To close our evening together, we're going to listen to Chanel Holder one more time, who will wrap this up for us.
Hi again. So this piece is a bit more catered to tonight, but not only tonight, the previous episodes as well. I glimpsed through what this program has been about, what this particular fellowship was about, and then sketched a bit, and then tonight I picked bits and pieces from conversations with the audience, questions that were discussed, and I'm going to present to you Possibilities Await Us.
Amazing.
Possibilities await us at the other side of our selfish actions and inactions. Possibilities to cross bridges of separations into reconciliation and unification. Possibilities of connections that stretch beyond people like us. Collaboration beyond current exploitations, subjectification and objectification of Mother Nature. Opportunities await us when we stop acting as if we are separate from the earth we come from and the species we share the world with. We can move from our incessant urge to supposedly progress, while in fact we happen to regress from our connection to the earth and its most vulnerable populations and people. Possibilities await us as we embrace a consciousness shift that will change our carelessness towards the planet, our desire to amass at the expense of another, and our need to accumulate while not really caring about the collateral damage, into harmonious cooperation and truly sustainable ambitions for all. Indeed, possibilities await us for a better outcome than the doom scenarios that we have created for ourselves. New outcomes await us as we use our imagination in service of what is keeping us alive. The damage we have done doesn't have to be the end of our story. No. Possibilities await us. Bring together the thinkers, the doers, the artists, and the shamans, those who nurture our connection with earth we share. Bring together the tree huggers, the earth stewards, and the lovers, the academics, the architects, the urbanists, the sociologists, the post-capitalists, and those who think outside of the boxes we've been living in. Those who color outside of the lines we've created for ourselves, the local champions, the common folk that translates the dense topics into everyday language. Bring together the disruptive visionaries and expansive revolutionaries, because the ways we've been going about this doesn't work anymore. We need changes. Change towards flourishment, change towards freedom, change towards restoration and systemic transformation. Bring together those who can think in terms of expansion while honoring Mother Nature, because we've got work to do. Possibilities await us. Don't you think it's time to talk about a new way of living? Don't you think that it's time to do some reflection, some introspection, and some healing? We must heal the parts of us that makes us feel entitled to abuse the planet to the brink of our own destruction. Let's evolve our collective value system and transform our beliefs about relationships. Let's lean into collaboration and trust. Let's change our mindsets to think more inclusive than the primitive ways we've been going about our relation with ourselves and the perceived other, including our separation from nature. Let's learn about our agency, how to use our innate power, our brilliant imagination, and our ability to take action to propel change. For possibilities await us when we take action. Let's talk about precautions, protections. Let's talk about decolonization and reparation. Let's talk about our shared humanity. Let's talk about responsibility, accountability, solidarity. Because it is within that space of ownership that we find the possibilities awaiting us. If we keep looking for solutions with the same consciousness that created the problem, we will inevitably have at some point or another a conflict of interest with life. Let's talk and let's practice. Let's talk about love and let's practice love. For love will lead an inclusive change, sustainable for all. Thank you.
What a gift, Chanel, you're giving us. Thank you so much for that poetic recap. Well, we've reached the end now, truly, of our conversation. And my wish for all of us is that we continue to run towards the beautiful, the possible, together, finding each other in common cause, in trust, in care, in resistance, and creativity, and to step into the roles that also come with our power, with our privilege, with our talents, that each of us bring to the table, so that we can redistribute, that we can regenerate, and that we can return to bringing back life exactly where we are. So thank you so much for that insight that we've woven all together. Yeah. we will be back with the DCFA next week on the 3rd of April. It's a DCFA special and a movie screening of The Great Plains, which will be all about regenerative farming. And the next DCFA Fellowship will continue on the 1st of May with Roberto Rocco. And during his fellowship, Roberto will explore the concept of the commons and cooperatives. So that has everything to do with what we've been discussing here and how we relate. Podcast Zwijger also collaborated with Artes, developing a new community research program. In the studio location Amsterdam Nieuw West, it will offer all kinds of workshops, lectures, experts, tours, artist dialogues, resident meetings, etc. You can apply for it by the 26th of March, but that was already passed. I'm sure you can still apply. Check out dezwijger.nl for more information on that. You're also invited to become a friend of, you're already friends of Podcast Zwijger, but you can even become an official friend if you scan the QR code. If you want to support the programming in Podcast, that always needs to be free and accessible for everyone, and that's one way to support that. And I just want to thank you all for being here again, for watching. More information on Designing Cities for All can be found at dezwijger.nl/DCFA. And for now, I wish you a very good evening and good luck.